If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description.
Okay.
Willem Petser's YouTube channel serves as a platform for what is often called Afrikaner national revisionism. His content frequently seeks to reevaluate the apartheid era by framing it through the lens of separate development, benevolent intent, and utilitarian success, often contrasting it with the failures of the post 1994 ANC government. Here are some specific revisionist narratives found on his channel. 1. The Untold Truth About Apartheid, What You Were Never Taught, argues that apartheid was a form of decolonization and a response to socio-economic pressures rather than racial malice. 2. Hendrik Verwoerd, What Bantu Education Got Right and the ANC Broke, reframes one of the most criticized apartheid policies as a successful literacy campaign. And 3. South Africa, The Truth About Land, promotes the empty land myth and argues that white settlers made the land through technology. So let's do a bit of a side-by-side analysis of the facts versus revisionism. On the intent of apartheid, the revisionist narrative of Willem Petser would be something like: frame apartheid as separate development or decolonization. He would present it as a benevolent attempt to give every ethnic group their own sovereign state, a homeland, so as they could avoid conflict and preserve culture. The historical fact of what apartheid actually was is that apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation designed to maintain white minority rule and economic hegemony. The homelands, Bantustans, were largely unviable, fragmented territories used to strip black South Africans of their citizenship and to be run as labor settlements. On Hendrik Verwoerd, Mr. Petser would portray Dr. Verwoerd as a liberal or visionary who wanted to uplift black people through literacy and separate self-governance. He would claim his policies were sabotaged by mining bosses and the CIA. The fact of the matter of what apartheid actually was is that Verwoerd is not called the architect of apartheid for nothing. He was actually one of the true visionaries of apartheid and what he was trying to build. He had a full picture of the thing, more than many people who took over the leadership of South Africa after him. Verwoerd, in his own 1953 speech, explicitly stated, "There is no place for the Bantu in the European community above the level of certain forms of labor." His goal was to ensure that black people remain a subservient labor class. Willem Petser on Bantu education would argue something like that it was a successful program that raised literacy rates to 90% by 1994 and provided a better education than the current system. He would then posit that it was intended to create a black intellectual elite, some sort of permanent well-to-do labor force. What is more factual, though, the Bantu education system was intentionally underfunded. Spending was roughly 1/10 per black child compared to a white one. It was designed to prevent black students from receiving an education that would allow them to compete for higher level jobs in the white economy, and it would make them a permanent labor force for the interest of the white government and the white population. It was also meant to propagandize them, to pacify them, and to make sure they were just happy enough, just skilled enough to be a good labor force, but no more. It was also used to keep the peace. It was a weapon just as much as the hippos and the tear gas was. It was just a weapon on the mind, a weapon directly aimed at the mind. The ANC uses it too, they just use it for different reasons. Their education system is broken on purpose because they're doing a different thing to what Verwoerd was doing. Willem Petser on land ownership would claim the empty land theory, that settlers found the interior of South Africa uninhabited or bought it fairly. He would argue that 80% of the land is unusable without Western technology like windmills, wind pumps, and boreholes, and the best land was given to black people. The facts of South African history would show the archaeological and historical evidence proves that Bantu-speaking farmers settled throughout South Africa, including the interior and the coast, for centuries before 1652. And their kingdoms stretched all over the landscape of South Africa, even though they congregated and maybe there were certain high population areas, the kingdom was far larger than just that population area. And later on, the 1913 Land Act restricted 80% of the population to just about 7 and later expanded to 13% of the land, forcing black people into the migrant labor system, with the homelands being the labor settlement and the township being the labor compound. And then you go into the city centers or the factory zones where the black people would work. The Bantu people did dig wells, and they did use canal systems to irrigate their crops, even in drier places. Willem Petzer would say of the crime against humanity label of apartheid, he would claim that the UN designation of apartheid as a crime against humanity was a Cold War communist Arab plot to delegitimize the West and the Afrikaner. The facts would say apartheid involved forced removals through the Group Areas Act, the suppression of all political dissent through violence, and the denial of basic human dignity and rights, false imprisonment, and many other things. That's a crime against humanity, no matter what human you would be doing that to. If apartheid was perpetrated on the Boers, it would be a crime against humanity, just like the imprisonment of Boers in those concentration camps was. An apartheid revisionist like Willem Petzer would narrate that apartheid was a response to high crime and white poverty in unsegregated slums intended to protect the high trust culture of Afrikaners from primitive influences. The facts would say, while white poverty, the poor white problem, was a concern, the solution being the systematic dispossession and impoverishment of the black majority is a racial one, not just for safety, but to ensure the cheap, controlled labor supply for white-owned mines and farms. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
The apartheid revisionist uses several techniques, like the utilitarian fallacy. Willem Petzer often uses the current failures of the South African state, things like crime, load shedding, failing schools, to imply that the previous system was better. This ignores what apartheid actually was and completely overlooks all methods, practices, and laws of oppression carried out by the apartheid fascist regime. Reducing the apartheid system to service delivery alone is asinine and dishonest. An apartheid revisionist would also use the technique of focus on intent over impact. By quoting Verwoerd's private letters or theoretical justifications for separate development, Petzer would prioritize the stated goal of the politicians over the reality of living under those rules, under those decisions, for millions of people who faced forced removals, passed laws, arrests, and state-sponsored violence. The apartheid revisionist falls back a lot on technological determinism, the argument that technology makes ownership, things like having windmills, wind pumps, is a common revisionist technique. It suggests that because indigenous people did not use specific Western technologies to farm semi-arid land, they had no claim to it, effectively erasing centuries of indigenous land use and pastoralism. While Petzer does provide detailed primary source citations, often from NP-era government documents, his analysis frequently omits the broader legislative and humanitarian context that define the apartheid era. In other words, what apartheid actually was, not just what one guy wrote one time. The totality of what he wrote is what you should consider, and how he implements and carries that out, and what the effects of that are on those populations he wrote that for.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Willem Petzer's content functions as a counter-narrative that seeks to restore Afrikaner pride by reframing systematic oppression as a misunderstood project of ethnic self-determination. Ironically, reverting right back to the sort of lies that the apartheid fascist regime tried to use unsuccessfully for years to try and prop up the fundamentally flawed ideology of apartheid. At its base, apartheid revisionism deeply misses the point and fails to understand how human beings actually function. Again, showing how wrong ideology can ruin otherwise sensible men and allow them to make fools of themselves. Sad. Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?